How is stress getting in the way of you dropping body fat? In this training, I want to walk you through the 3 stress archetypes that we've defined after working with thousands and thousands of busy humans that have either seen their body shift and they're gaining weight, their energy's lower, or simply what they used to do is no longer working and they need a different approach. In this training, I want to walk you through what these 3 archetypes are so you can help identify what's really going on for you and how that's getting in the way, and then more importantly, what you can do about it. And I've got a really cool giveaway for you if you watch to the end. So the first one I want to go through is the gut archetype. This is a really interesting one. We look a lot into gut health, and the way we can sort of define this is if you've ever had butterflies before a race or before an event or an exam, whatever it might be, it's that stress or anxiety that you can feel in your gut that we call butterflies. Now what that is very much a really strong response of that gut to brain connection. When we're stressing out and we're causing some level of anxiety, we're also going to notice that in our gut, and that connection has that communication pathway with our stomach that's causing us to be in that fight or flight response, which means that we're going to be a lot more alert, a lot more focused, really focusing on that particular event, project, whatever. But it means that it really significantly hinders digestion. And in many cases, if you let these butterflies go too long, you're probably going to have issues. You're probably going to have to run off to the bathroom, or overall just have a not very happy stomach. And what happens if this is caused and reinforced too many times is we start to notice a lot of gut issues coming through. And we see this all the time with clients, is that it isn't necessarily even sensitivities or allergies from certain foods. It may simply be a strong stress response that is not controlled and is there chronically for periods of time. And if you're in a high pressure role, or you tend to get anxious throughout the day and you really hold that physically, this can really show up in the gut. And when we look at this response, when it's coming through as bloating or gas, or we're noticing we've got loose stools, or we're simply just not extracting the energy from food we once were, having that awareness of looking into how we slow down that chronic stress response throughout the day. How do we stop and pause? How do we breathe? How do we simply pay attention to what's happening for us? So if it is that gut archetype, if you do notice that you are stressed for periods of the day and it's really showing up in your gut and you're noticing that things aren't so happy, then looking at simply bringing in some form of walk after meals or after those particularly stressful meetings, taking a pause and just taking 3 to 5 deep breaths after you've noticed you've been a little bit more heightened, a little bit more stressed. That's going to have a huge impact to your body overall, but it's very much this reinforcement of this gut-brain connection and how many of those nerve endings reside in our gut and are causing things to really be stirred up down there. So bringing awareness of your gut archetype is very much going to be how we lower that stress response, how we pause, how we break it up a little bit rather than just being stressed throughout the entire day. So that's your gut archetype. Maybe you resonate with that one. The second one I want to address is the pituitary archetype. And now where we look at this is very much more of a hormonal adjustment. Now it very much ties into this chronic stress state, very much like the gut archetype. We're in a space where whether we're in the car, we're having an argument, we're at work and we're really deep into a particular project, stress for a period of time is not bad. And in many ways, there's actually some really fascinating studies showing when we define stress as being a good thing, rather than it constantly being something we're trying to fight, we actually respond to it significantly better. So my goal here is not to label stress as bad, it's defining the difference between stress and distress. And being chronic is more of a definition of where it becomes more unhelpful to the body. And at quite a simple level, when stress is high, you're gaining body fat and you're dropping muscle if it's left uncontrolled. But in the pituitary style, what happens here is what we're looking at is we start to intentionally create deadlines or stressful situations to get stuff moving. I know I've been this in the past where, I've got all this space in a particular day and I don't really get anything done. And then when everything's rushed and it has to be done by 3 o'clock, then I get an amazing amount of work done. And it has to be these sort of set external deadlines or internal deadlines that really cause me to be stressed. And it becomes a response that energizes us and we almost seek it as being this adrenaline rush that really runs us through our day. And if not controlled, that becomes something that's very much reinforced. And we call this the pregnenolone steal, which is ultimately your body is now dumping its energy into producing cortisol rather than your main sex hormones. Now, if this is happening once every now and then, it's not too much of an issue. It gets up and go and you're into it. But if this is a response that's reinforced on a daily basis, then what you're now doing is absolutely tanking your testosterone and estrogen, on the female side, progesterone also, whereas you're having this really elevated level of cortisol in the bloodstream and it really keeps you in a very heightened space. You get a lot done, but long term you notice that you really have a hard time recovering, sleeping, and maintaining any level of favorable body composition. So what we're really looking at here is, well, how does this show up? It's probably going to show up in some digestive symptoms, very much like the gut archetype, but in many cases, this is really blunting the hunger response. We tend to notice that we fast throughout the day. We've got too much to do. We couldn't possibly sit down for a meal, but then these tend to be these big gorges on a big meal at the end of the day. Or finally, we kind of wake up from this adrenaline rush and we realize we're starving and we eat a bunch of food that's usually not all that favorable. So it's more a case of a lack of structure in our day, our ability to, again, pause. It comes from that same fight or flight response. It just comes up or shows itself in different ways, where the gut archetype is very much a gurging and rumbling of the stomach and a lack of absorption of foods, breakdown of that gut lining. With the pituitary archetype, this is very much a detriment towards our body composition overall. It may not show up in the gut, it may show up in more of our eating responses, or simply that cortisol belly where we hold it a bit more around our waist, love handles, all around there, even if we are lean in other places. So that awareness of that stress response and how it shows up and how you look physically could be something that maybe you identify with both the gut and the pituitary archetype, or simply you see the nuance and how that shows up for you differently. The third one I want to go into is fascinating, and I think it ties in, and in some cases you can be all three, but this is a really interesting one that I see if you've done more than a couple diets in the past, and you've really created these rules around food. And a response that really triggers me personally is, can I have this? Well, of course you can, right? Is it helpful or is it unhelpful? It becomes a better frame of reference that gives me permission to think about how I feel on certain food, right? If I have donuts and I feel kind of bloated in the face and really lethargic, then I'm probably going to have less of them. Is it a good or a bad food? No. It's just a food that's less helpful or helpful towards my goals, towards having energy throughout the day and how I want to show up. If it's my partner's birthday party and this is part of the experience and I don't notice it's too much issue, well then cool, it's part of the experience. But what I'm talking about here is that we create such a strong rubber band effect around foods. It's bad, it's bad, it's bad. I can have it all, right? And that snap of the rubber band is what I'm talking about. Is we tend to see this come through where when we create such strong pressures around deadlines or good and bad foods, what we tend to find is we can be good, we can be good, we can be good. We don't pat ourselves a bit on the back in that process, and then we get to a particular event where it's less than perfect, less than ideal, being a conference, travel, a birthday party, and we gorge on all of it, right? We start to eat significantly more than we need to. We can't just have the one wine, we end up having 2 bottles. We can't just have the one donut, we demolish the whole platter. It's a lot of these responses where we've created such strong rules around what foods are and this real negative association towards good and bad that we have this internal response that really starts to build up. And it's very much the best I can visualize it is that rubber band. We stretch and we stretch and stretch until we can't hold it anymore, and then we have the whole bottle or the whole cheesecake or whatever it might be. So the big part here is we tend to see this around, there's a really fascinating study that I keep referring back to, which is if I gave you a smoothie and I said this is full of all the beautiful nutrients and you're going to feel great off it, you're going to digest this a certain way and your body's going to hopefully digest that fairly favorably. If I gave you the same smoothie, same ingredients, same everything in it, but I simply told you that it was full of all these bad chemicals and toxins and it was the newest thing from McDonald's, then your body would digest that a completely different way. And what that shows is how much there's an association towards the stress or the concern around what we're eating and how our body will digest it differently. We'll literally feel more inflamed, we'll feel more brain fog, we'll feel more bloated simply by how we think of that food, and that's a stress response. So this third archetype, this diet archetype, is very much an awareness of highlighting how much we create such strong labels around foods being good and bad, and that in itself is causing further stress to our digestive tract, to our ability to drop body fat or recover overall, and to just be able to enjoy certain social occasions without it being massively detrimental to our health overall. Because if we can enjoy that particular barbecue or conference and have that little something on the side that we enjoyed and we carry on with our day, that's very different than having the cookie and then stressing about, I shouldn't have had that cookie all afternoon. We now have that exacerbated stress response for the rest of the day. So we've got our gut archetype, we've got our pituitary archetype, and we have our diet archetype. Which one or 3 of those are you identifying with? Which one of those could you potentially work on? And hopefully I've given you a couple of awareness points that you'll now see this both in yourself and others around how we create some unnecessary stress around our day and navigating a healthy lifestyle. If you want access to the entire formula, like I said, we've worked with thousands of busy humans going through this process and working out what's that little linchpin, what's that sequence of steps we need to place for your age and stage of life to get the most out of your body in a way that your body never holds you back. You feel great on a day-to-day basis and you're able to perform, function, and recover in a way that you really enjoy. Your body's not holding you back. If you want access to this entire body reset blueprint, then simply click below. I'll add a link underneath, or simply comment if you're on Facebook, blueprint, so that I can send you through that full 5-step guide on both a little bit deeper explanation on these archetypes if this is something you've identified with, as well as the full Fat Loss 5 sequence that we walk all of our clients through in some way or another to really build a proper foundation of health and longevity long term. All right. So I hope you've enjoyed today's training. It gives you a little bit of awareness in what we see very regularly and a nice way to look deeper into how we think and what difference that makes in how we show up. So until next time, I hope that's helpful, gives you something to think about. See ya.